What in God's name happened here? The words tore from Ethan Cole's throat as he burst through the living room door, the echo slamming against the walls like a gunshot. His police badge caught the flicker of the hallway light, then froze. Clara Bennett, 27, his nanny, gentle, quiet, and steady, was tied to a chair, wrists red and trembling, her face pale under the flicker of the lamp. Beside her, little Lucy, just 5 years old, slept on the rug, clutching her broken teddy bear. The air stank of fear and cold rain. The window was cracked open, curtains flapping, and in the silence, a low growl. Buddy, the 6-year-old German shepherd, stood rigid, furs bristling, eyes locked on the open door. Ethan's voice dropped, raw and hoarse. "Who did this to you?" Clara's lips quivered. She said she'd come back for the child. Ethan's hand went to his holster. The storm outside howled back. "Please support us by subscribing to the channel." Denver had not seen sunlight for 3 days. The city was buried under a heavy quilt of snow, the kind that muffled every sound but the wind's quiet howl between the frozen houses. The streets were slick with ice, the lamplight fractured by flurries that drifted like ghosts. Officer Ethan Cole gripped the steering wheel of his black Ford police cruiser as he pulled into his driveway, the headlights cutting through the swirling frost. He was 35 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, with short brown hair streaked by premature silver near his temples. His hazel eyes, sharp but tired, had that distant glaze of a man who had seen too many dark nights. Since his wife's death 2 years ago, he had lived on duty and coffee, two things that kept him moving but never truly warm. Tonight, his shift had stretched until dawn, and the promise of sleep was the only light he looked forward to. He parked, turned off the engine, and listened for a moment. Nothing. Just the faint whimper of the wind scraping against the eaves of the small suburban home. But as soon as he stepped onto the porch, a faint sound reached him. Something off, not quite wind. A low growl. Ethan froze. It came again, deeper, more deliberate. His hand went instinctively to the gun on his belt as he pushed open the front door. The air hit him first, a mixture of cold rain, iron, and fear. His voice tore through the silence before his mind could catch up. What in God's name happened here? The door slammed against the wall with a bang. His badge glinted under the hallway light before the sight before him froze him mid-step. In the dim glow of a flickering lamp, Clara Bennett sat tied to a wooden chair in the middle of the living room. She was 27, slender, with long light brown hair pulled into a messy bun, her soft green eyes wide with terror. Normally, Clara carried herself with quiet grace, a calm presence that steadied the child she cared for. And, at times, even Ethan himself. She had been a literature graduate before taking the nanny job after her parents' deaths left her with mounting debts. Life had taught her patience the hard way, but tonight, that calm was shattered. Her wrists were raw and red where the ropes dug into her skin, and the tears streaking her cheeks caught the lamplight like tiny crystals. Beside her, curled up on the rug, lay Lucy Cole, Ethan's 5-year-old daughter. The little girl was small and frail, her light brown hair tangled over her face. She wore a once bright pink wool dress, now smudged with dirt and melted snow, clutching her broken teddy bear to her chest. She looked so peaceful, it almost broke Ethan's heart, as if she had found a dream safer than the world around her. "Clara?" he whispered, rushing to her side. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but only a faint whimper escaped. Ethan reached for the ropes, but a growl stopped him again. From the shadowed corner near the fireplace emerged Buddy, his 6-year-old German shepherd. Muscular, with a thick coat of black and tan fur and sharp amber eyes, Buddy was the only creature Ethan fully trusted. He had served beside Ethan in the canine unit before an injury forced the dog into early retirement. Yet, even off duty, Buddy never lost that quiet vigilance, the kind of discipline forged through years of training and loyalty. Tonight, his fur bristled like iron spikes as he moved between Ethan and the open back door, teeth bared toward the night. Ethan followed Buddy's gaze. The back window was cracked open, curtains flapping wildly from the winter gusts. Snow had drifted inside, melting on the hardwood floor into small puddles that caught the light. There, faint but clear, were footprints. Women's footprints, barefoot, leading out into the yard. Ethan's stomach turned to ice. He had seen that shoe size before, that small arch in the snow. Victoria. Victoria Hale had once been the woman who made him believe in family. She was beautiful in a haunting movie star kind of way. tall, blonde, with ocean blue eyes and a smile that could hide her cruelty. But after Lucy was born, her charm began to curdle into something bitter. The drinking came first, then the jealousy, the late-night fights that ended with broken glass and bruised words. 2 years ago, Ethan divorced her after she struck Lucy in a drunken rage. Since then, he had full custody and nightmares that wouldn't leave. Now, she had come back. Ethan's voice hardened. "Buddy, stay!" The dog obeyed instantly, still glaring at the window. Ethan grabbed his pocket knife and cut through Clara's bindings. She gasped as circulation returned to her hands. "Ethan, she was here," she whispered, her voice trembling like thin glass. She said she'd come back for the child. His jaw clenched so tight it ached. When? An hour ago, maybe less. She was drunk, furious. She kept saying you took everything from her. Ethan turned away, trying to keep his voice steady. "Did she hurt Lucy?" Clara shook her head, tears streaming down. "No, she just kept shouting. I tried to calm her down, but she hit me, tied me up, said she'd teach me to stay in my place. Then she left." Buddy whined softly and pressed his head against Clara's arm, as if offering comfort. The gesture made her smile weakly despite the pain. "He protected Lucy," she murmured. When she came close, Buddy growled until she backed away. Ethan exhaled slowly, both furious and grateful. He knelt beside Lucy, brushing her hair back. "You're safe now, baby," he whispered, though the words felt fragile. Lucy stirred but didn't wake. She mumbled something, a word that made Ethan's breath hitch. "Mommy." It was a soft sound, innocent, but it cut deeper than any blade. He closed his eyes. The therapist had told him Lucy still dreamed of her mother, still mixed fear and love into something she couldn't untangle. He rose and pulled his phone from his belt. "Dispatch, this is Cole. I need units at my residence, 212 Birchwood Drive. Possible break-in. Suspect fled on foot." The radio crackled. "Copy that, Cole. Back up en route. Cancel the press," Ethan added sharply. "No reports. Not yet." He wouldn't have Lucy's name dragged across headlines again. When he hung up, Clara was watching him. "You're protecting her," she said quietly, "even after everything." "She's still Lucy's mother," Ethan replied, "and my daughter's already suffered enough." The wind outside howled louder, pushing the curtains flat against the wall, like ghosts trying to get in. Ethan grabbed a blanket from the couch and wrapped it around Clara's shoulders. "You did good," he said softly. "You kept her safe." "I was terrified," she admitted, "but I remembered what you said. That courage isn't about being unafraid." He gave a tired smile. "It's about doing what's right, even when you are." Buddy let out a low bark, snapping their attention back to the door. Ethan raised his gun again, but it was only Officer Sarah Jennings stepping inside. A tall, lean woman in her mid-30s, with dark hair tied in a tight braid and pale blue eyes sharp as steel. Sarah was Ethan's partner on the force, respected for her precision and calm under pressure. She had a reputation for never hesitating, forged by years of surviving in a male-dominated precinct that doubted her at every turn. She took one look at the scene, Clara's bound chair, Lucy asleep on the rug, Buddy still growling low, and exhaled. "Jesus, Cole, what the hell happened here?" "Victoria," Ethan said simply. Sarah's jaw tightened. "I thought she was out of state." "So did I." He rubbed a hand over his face, exhaustion settling in like lead. "Track her down, but quietly. No reports, no noise. I want this handled off the record." Sarah nodded. "Understood." She crouched to pat Buddy's head. "You're still a hero, huh?" The dog relaxed slightly, tail thumping once against the floor. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Ethan looked at Clara and at Lucy and Buddy sitting protectively beside them. His home had turned into a crime scene, but somehow, in that wreckage, there was still something unbroken: trust. As the first responders arrived, he stood by the door, staring into the night. Snowflakes swirled past the porch light, erasing the footprints one by one until all that remained was white silence. He knew Victoria was out there, watching, waiting. But as long as Buddy drew breath, as long as Lucy slept under his roof, she would never take them again. Morning came pale and slow over Denver, the kind of morning where the sky seemed to have forgotten the color blue. The snow outside the Cole residence had hardened into a thin crust of ice that cracked beneath each step. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of burnt coffee and the metallic tang of tension that still lingered from the night before. Ethan Cole sat at the kitchen table, his elbows propped against the wood, staring at the half-empty mug in front of him, as if it might offer answers. His hazel eyes were bloodshot, his jaw tight. He had been awake all night reviewing his notes, mentally replaying every second since he found Clara bound and Lucy asleep on the rug. Clara Bennett moved quietly around the kitchen, her movements soft and deliberate, the way one learns to move after surviving fear. Her wrists were bandaged, her long, light brown hair was tied loosely, and though exhaustion shadowed her green eyes, there was still a gentleness in her face that never quite dimmed. She was pouring warm milk into a small cup for Lucy, who sat at the table in her pink wool dress, clean this time, though the torn seam at the shoulder remained as a silent reminder. Lucy's small hands clutched her teddy bear like a shield. "It's all right, sweetheart," Clara whispered, kneeling beside her. "No one's coming tonight. You're safe here." Lucy didn't reply. She just nodded, her gaze fixed on the steam rising from her cup, lost in thought. Buddy, the German shepherd, lay stretched across the threshold between the kitchen and living room. His black and tan fur shimmered in the pale morning light, his amber eyes half closed but alert. Every few seconds his ears flicked, catching sounds only he could hear. The distant rumble of a snowplow, a creak in the old wood frame, the faint buzz of something electrical. Sarah Jennings, Ethan's partner, stood by the window, her tall, lean frame silhouetted against the gray light. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat braid down her back, and she wore her navy field jacket zipped high against the cold. Sarah had always carried herself with quiet authority, a kind of presence that made people straighten up when she walked into a room. Years ago, she had been the only female officer on the night shift in a precinct that treated her like a mistake waiting to happen. One drunken domestic call changed that. She talked down an armed husband without firing a shot, saving both his wife and the man himself. Since then, Sarah had learned to control every word, every breath, never showing fear, never letting anyone see how much it cost her. She turned toward Ethan now, arms folded. "I am to put out a quiet inquiry," she said. "No sightings of Victoria Hale at bus stations, airports, or hospitals. She's vanished." Ethan rubbed his temples. "She's not gone. She's hiding. She always was good at that." Sarah's voice softened, just a touch. "You think she'll come back?" "I don't think—" Ethan paused, eyes drifting to Lucy. "I know." Clara finished washing the cups and turned. "I can stay with Lucy today," she said quickly. "You should rest." Ethan shook his head. "Rest isn't going to fix this. She broke into my home, tied you up, threatened my daughter. There's something else going on here." As if to emphasize his words, Buddy suddenly lifted his head and gave a short, sharp bark, staring toward the corner of the living room. The sudden noise made Lucy flinch and Clara's breath hitch. Ethan stood, instantly alert, his hand brushing his holster. "Buddy!" The dog growled low in his throat, ears pinned forward. Ethan followed his gaze to the bookshelf that stood against the far wall. It was an old oak piece, inherited from Ethan's father, filled with case files, crime novels, and Lucy's drawings taped along the side. But now, one of the lower panels looked off, slightly ajar. Ethan crouched, running his fingers along the wood. There was a tiny slit, almost invisible, near the baseboard. He took his pocket knife, slid it in, and heard a faint click. The panel loosened. Behind it, wrapped in dust and insulation fibers, was a small black object. He held it up to the light. A voice recorder. Sarah leaned in, frowning. "That's not standard issue. Looks like an old surveillance model." Ethan's heartbeat quickened. He pressed play. The machine crackled for a second. Then a voice, female, familiar, fragile but furious, filled the room. "Victoria. He doesn't know. I still have the key. He thinks he can erase me, but I'm not the one who should be erased. You said you'd help me. You promised." Then another voice, male, deeper, calm but cold. "Careful what you say, Victoria. Remember who gave you that key. You think the badge makes him untouchable? I've seen men like Cole fall before. All it takes is one mistake." Ethan's stomach turned. Victoria's voice came again, bitter, trembling. "Then you'll help me destroy him." Static, then silence. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "He's a cop," she muttered. "She said he has a badge." Ethan shut off the recorder and stared at it in disbelief. "Someone from the department," he said quietly. "Someone feeding her information." Sarah crossed her arms tighter. "You're thinking internal leak." "I'm thinking setup," Ethan replied. "Someone wants me off the force. Or worse." Buddy growled again, pacing near the radio on the shelf. The sound of static crackled faintly from the speaker, even though it wasn't turned on. Sarah frowned. Is that thing supposed to be? No, Ethan said, stepping closer. The dog barked again, teeth bared. Ethan unplugged the radio, but the faint buzz didn't stop. Clara took a step back. What is that? Signal bleed, Ethan said grimly. Or someone listening. He turned the radio around and found a small circular transmitter glued near the battery casing. Someone had modified the unit to act as a listening device. Jesus, Sarah whispered. They bugged your house. Clara's face paled. You mean she's been hearing us? Maybe not her, Ethan said, inspecting the transmitter, but someone connected to her, someone who wanted to know everything we said. Lucy, oblivious to the adult panic, had wandered to the coffee table where her crayons lay scattered. She sat cross-legged on the floor and began to draw, tongue poking slightly from the corner of her mouth, the way children do when concentrating. Buddy lay down beside her, tail thumping softly, eyes watching her every move. Clara crouched next to Lucy, trying to smile. What are you drawing, sweetheart? Lucy held up the paper. A woman with long yellow hair stood beside a large dog with glowing orange eyes. Above them, dark clouds spilled rain and lightning, but a bright patch of white surrounded the dog like a halo. It's Buddy, Lucy said softly. He keeps the bad lady away. Ethan and Clara exchanged a glance. Sarah looked down at the picture. That's eerie, she murmured. She remembers, Clara said, voice trembling. She's drawing what happened. Ethan crouched to Lucy's level. That woman, he said gently. Did she come here? Lucy hesitated, then nodded. She said she'd take me home. Home? Ethan asked, but Lucy had already turned back to her crayons. For a moment, the room was silent, except for the soft scratch of color on paper and the faint hum of the snowstorm outside. Buddy yawned, then stood, padding toward Lucy's blanket. He took one corner of it gently in his teeth, pulled it over her legs, then sat beside her like a sentinel. The gesture drew a soft laugh from Clara, the first genuine one since the attack. You see, she whispered, he's our guardian angel. Ethan looked at the dog, then the child, then the recorder in his hand. His life was unraveling thread by thread, and yet in this tiny circle of warmth, a wounded woman, a silent child, a loyal dog, something humans still fought to survive. Sarah checked her watch. I'll take the recorder to the lab, off the record. No paperwork, no digital trace. Whoever this badge is, they won't see it coming. Ethan nodded. Thank you, Sarah. She gave him a thin smile. Don't thank me yet. If there's a cop in this, we're all standing on ice. She zipped her coat and headed for the door. And Ethan, keep that dog close. After she left, the house fell quiet again. Clara tucked Lucy into bed for her nap, humming softly, an old lullaby her mother used to sing. Buddy curled at the foot of the bed, eyes half open, ears twitching. Ethan sat by the window, staring out at the yard where the snow had begun to fall again, covering the footprints, the tire marks, the evidence. The storm erased everything, but not the sound that haunted him now, the echo of Victoria's voice through static. He whispered to the empty room, "If you want a war, you've found one." The blizzard had thinned by morning, leaving Denver blanketed in white silence. The roads glistened with a thin film of ice that cracked beneath tires, and the city seemed to breathe again after days of storm. Ethan Cole's police cruiser moved slowly down Colfax Avenue, his breath fogging the windshield. He hadn't slept in 24 hours. The voice recorder lay on the passenger seat, silent but heavy with meaning. Inside it lived Victoria's betrayal, and someone else's voice, one that belonged to a man who once wore a badge. Travis Benson. The call came in just after dawn. A woman had been pulled from a wreck on County Road 19, matching Victoria Hale's description. Her car had hit a guardrail and rolled twice down an embankment. Alive, but barely. Ethan hadn't thought twice. He drove straight to Denver General Hospital, the ache in his chest mixing anger with dread. The automatic doors hissed open, releasing the antiseptic sting of disinfectant. The reception area was quiet, except for the squeak of rubber soles and the low hum of the heating vents. Nurse Caroline Beck, a petite woman in her early 30s with freckles across her nose and cropped auburn hair, looked up as he approached. "Detective Cole?" she asked softly. "She's stable but sedated. Room 214. Her tone carried the practiced calm of someone who'd seen too many broken bodies to flinch anymore. Ethan nodded, his boots echoing down the hall. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, reflecting off white tiles like sterile mirrors. As he reached the door, he paused, his hand hovering over the handle. A dozen emotions warred inside him. Rage, pity, guilt. But in the end, duty won. He pushed the door open. Victoria lay against the stark white sheets, a bandage wrapped around her head, her blonde hair matted and tangled. Her once sharp blue eyes were red-rimmed and glassy, the color of a faded sky. When she saw Ethan, her lips trembled. "You came," she whispered, her voice cracked and hoarse. Ethan said nothing at first. He stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, the badge on his jacket glinting under the overhead light. "You almost killed Clara," he said finally, his voice flat but shaking underneath. "You terrified our daughter. Tell me why." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that. I never wanted to hurt Lucy. I just wanted you to listen." "Breaking into my house was your idea of conversation?" Ethan snapped. She winced, pressing a hand to her ribs. "He said you wouldn't listen any other way." Ethan frowned. "Who?" She hesitated, looking away. "Travis Benson?" The name hung between them like a storm cloud. Ethan knew that name all too well. Travis Benson, 40 years old, 6'2", a decorated officer until 5 years ago when Internal Affairs exposed his connection to a smuggling ring. Ethan had led the investigation that ended Benson's career. The man had been furious, threatening lawsuits, even death, before vanishing into the criminal underworld he once policed. "Where is he?" Ethan demanded. Victoria shook her head. "He finds me. I never find him. It started a year after the divorce. He said he could help me get Lucy back. He showed me photos of you, of Clara, said you were replacing me. He said you had everything I lost because you ruined him." Her voice broke. "He told me I could make you feel what he felt, but it got out of control. He wanted more. He wanted to destroy you." Ethan took a step closer, his expression tightening. "And you believed him?" "I was angry, lost. You took Lucy. My life was ashes." Travis knew what to say. Her eyes met his, pleading. "I didn't know what he'd do." Ethan's jaw flexed, but before he could answer, a sharp bark echoed from the doorway. Buddy stood there, his thick black and tan fur dusted with snow, amber eyes focused and alert. His tail was stiff, his posture tense. Ethan crouched to pat the dog's neck. "You shouldn't be here, boy." Buddy ignored him, his nose twitching toward the hallway. A low growl escaped his throat. Nurse Caroline appeared behind them, startled. "Is he supposed to?" Ethan silenced her with a gesture. "He smells something." He followed Buddy's gaze to the glass doors leading to the parking lot. Through the fogged glass, a dark shape sat at the curb, Victoria's wrecked car, covered in snow. It had been towed in for investigation. "Stay here," Ethan ordered, grabbing his gloves. Buddy trotted beside him as they stepped into the biting air. The snow crunched beneath their boots. The car sat under a flickering streetlight, its frame twisted, one door crushed in. Ethan opened the trunk. Inside were shattered glass, torn fabric, and, his breath caught, a camera. A Nikon, professional grade, with a telephoto lens. He switched it on. The last image displayed was his own house, the window to Lucy's room glowing faintly. "She was spying on us," he muttered. Buddy sniffed the interior, then froze, nose pressed to the corner panel. A second later, his hackles rose. He barked sharply, pawing at the metal. Ethan leaned in, catching a faint, acrid odor, chemical, oily, explosives. "Move!" Ethan shouted, yanking Victoria, who had followed weakly from the hospital entrance, backward just as Buddy lunged away. The car erupted behind them in a burst of flame, the shockwave knocking Ethan to the ground. Heat seared his cheek, and glass rained down like molten snow. He coughed, pulling himself up. "Victoria!" She was lying a few feet away, coughing, her gown torn, soot smeared across her face. Buddy limped over, whining softly, his fur singed but intact. Ethan's hands shook as he checked the dog's flank. No bleeding, just heat burns. He exhaled. "Good boy, you just saved both of us." Paramedics rushed out, shouting. One of them, a tall man with graying hair named Dr. Mason Green, took charge immediately. Mason was in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered but gentle in movement, with steady brown eyes behind thin glasses. Years of dealing with emergency trauma had carved calm into his features like stone. "Get her on oxygen," he said briskly, motioning to Victoria. "And you, sit down before you fall down, officer." Ethan obeyed reluctantly, still watching the fire consume what was left of the car. Someone had wired it to explode. That meant Travis hadn't just used Victoria. He was cleaning up his trail. Back inside the hospital, Victoria trembled, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. "He said he'd kill me if I told anyone," she whispered. "You don't know what he's capable of." Ethan met her gaze. "Oh, I do." He glanced at Buddy, who lay by the door, tail tapping weakly against the tile. "And he just made a mistake." Meanwhile, back at the house, Clara sat on the edge of Lucy's bed. The little girl had woken from a nightmare, her cheeks wet with tears. "She said she'll come back," Lucy murmured. "Why would she say that if she's my mom?" Clara's throat tightened. She brushed the child's hair from her face. "Sometimes people hurt others because they're hurting inside, Lucy. It's not your fault." Lucy blinked up at her, voice barely a whisper. "Did your mommy hurt you too?" The question struck Clara like an arrow. Her own mother had died when she was 10, leaving her with a father who drowned his grief in silence and whiskey. "She left," Clara said softly, "but she still loved me, just like your mommy loves you, even if she's lost right now." Lucy reached out and wrapped her small arms around Clara's neck. "You're nice, Aunt Clara." Clara froze, the words sinking deep. She smiled through tears. "I'll always be here, sweetheart." In the quiet that followed, Buddy returned home with Ethan hours later, bandaged but proud, tail wagging once before collapsing beside the fireplace. Ethan dropped to one knee, scratching behind his ears. "You've got more lives than any of us, pal." Clara looked up from where she sat by Lucy's bed, her expression soft. "Is she alive?" Ethan nodded. "For now, but this isn't over." He glanced toward the window where snow drifted against the glass. The reflection of the flames from the car explosion still burned behind his eyes. Travis Benson had returned from the shadows, and this time, he wasn't just after revenge, he was after Ethan's family. The storm had returned to Denver with vengeance. The night sky was a smear of gray and white, the snow falling thick and fast, burying the world beneath a heavy silence, broken only by the hum of engines and the occasional police siren cutting through the dark. Ethan Cole drove down Highway 285, his headlights struggling against the veil of flurries. Buddy sat in the passenger seat, his head low but eyes sharp, the faint scar on his shoulder catching the dashboard light. He had refused to rest, despite his burns from the explosion. Ethan had tried to leave him with Clara, but the dog had followed him to the cruiser door, silent, unyielding. There was no arguing with loyalty like that. The GPS pinged once before losing signal. The coordinates traced back to the last location from the memory card found in Victoria's recovered belongings, a warehouse in the industrial outskirts of Denver. Ethan tightened his grip on the wheel. "This is it, buddy. The end of the trail." The dog's ears twitched, as if understanding. The warehouse loomed ahead, skeletal and cold, its windows shattered, its corrugated walls streaked with rust. The sign above the gate had long since peeled away, leaving only fragments of faded lettering. Ethan parked the cruiser behind a line of dumpsters, checked his sidearm, and slipped on his gloves. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he moved, cautious but swift. Buddy followed close behind, his paws leaving clear prints in the white powder. Inside, the air was heavy with damp and oil. Flashlight beams danced across abandoned crates, dust, and footprints half buried under a new layer of snow tracked in through the broken door. Ethan crouched near one set, fresh. "We're not alone," he whispered. A voice echoed from the shadows. "You never were." Ethan froze. Travis Benson stepped into the faint light, his large frame filling the space. He looked harder, older than Ethan remembered. His face weathered, jaw rough with gray stubble, the scar along his cheek, pale against his tan skin. His eyes were ice cold, the kind that once commanded fear in interrogation rooms. He wore a heavy black coat over tactical pants and boots, the look of a soldier who had never left the war. "You should have left it alone," Travis said. "You think the system you serve is clean? You think you're the hero? I think you're done hiding behind ghosts," Ethan replied. "You used my ex-wife. You spied on my daughter. You planted bombs, Benson. You crossed a line you can't come back from." Travis gave a low chuckle. "You talk like you don't know how deep the rot goes. You think I'm the only one? They let me fall so they could keep their hands clean. Every dirty deal I took for them, every name I buried, they owed me. I'm just collecting interest." Ethan kept his gun steady. "You're lying." "Am I?" Travis tossed a small flash drive across the floor. It skidded to Ethan's boots. "Everything's on there. The smuggling routes, the accounts, the cops who took the money, even your captain, Simmons. The name hit like a slap. Captain Harold Simmons had been Ethan's mentor, a compact man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a habit of biting his lip when thinking. He'd guided Ethan through his early years on the force, always preaching about integrity, about doing right even when nobody's watching. The thought of Simmons involved in corruption made Ethan's stomach churn. Travis smirked at the hesitation. See, you don't know who's behind you anymore? Then let me start with the one right in front of me, Ethan said. The gunshot came without warning. The muzzle flash lit the dark like lightning. Ethan dove behind a crate, splinters flying past his cheek. Buddy barked furiously, charging forward. Travis fired again, but the dog was faster. He lunged, teeth sinking into Travis's wrist, forcing the gun down. A third shot exploded into the floor. Ethan moved in, tackling Travis to the ground. The struggle was brutal, a tangle of fists, snow, and broken glass. Travis swung a metal pipe from the floor, striking Ethan's shoulder. Pain flared, but he held his ground, knocking the weapon aside and pinning Travis with his knee. Buddy still held the man's arm, growling low, blood seeping from his own reopened wound. "It's over," Ethan said between breaths. "You're under arrest." Travis spat at him. "You think you won because you still wear that badge?" Ethan tightened the cuffs on his wrists. "No, I won because I still believe in what it's supposed to mean." He called for backup, his voice hoarse over the radio. "Suspect in custody. Need immediate transport." Outside, the wind howled. Back at home, Clara Bennett sat in the living room, her eyes flicking toward the clock every few seconds. The storm outside made the windows tremble. Lucy slept on the couch beside Buddy's empty blanket, her small hand clutching a crayon drawing. The image showed Buddy standing between two figures, a woman and a child, while snow swirled around them. Clara brushed a strand of hair from the girl's forehead, whispering softly, "He'll be back soon." Then came the noise, a soft creak at the back door. Clara stiffened. She reached for her phone, but before she could dial, the door burst open. Two men in dark clothes stormed in, one tall and thin, the other stocky, faces hidden by scarves. "Where's the cop?" the tall one hissed. Clara stepped back, shielding Lucy. "He's not here," the man sneered. "Then we'll wait." He grabbed her by the arm, forcing her into a chair. Lucy stirred awake, blinking in confusion. "Miss Clara?" she whispered. The stocky man pulled out a knife. "Shut her up." Clara's heart pounded, but she forced calm into her voice. "Please don't hurt her. She's just a child." The tall one laughed. "Should have thought of that before you worked for him." Outside, through the blizzard, came a faint echo, one that started low, then rose like a storm. A bark, then another. The tall man frowned. "What the—" The window shattered inward, glass spraying across the floor as Buddy leaped through, his fur soaked and streaked with blood from the warehouse fight. He hit the tall intruder like a bullet, teeth snapping around the man's arm. The stocky one lunged, but Clara seized the lamp from the table and swung it with all her strength. It crashed into his head, sending him sprawling. Buddy growled, standing protectively between Clara and Lucy, his eyes blazing. Outside, porch lights flickered on across the neighborhood as the sound of barking and shouting drew attention. Clara pulled Lucy into her arms. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay." The girl trembled, whispering, "He came back." Buddy limped slightly, but refused to lie down, keeping his gaze locked on the fallen men until sirens wailed in the distance. Minutes later, Ethan burst through the front door, snow clinging to his uniform, his face pale with exhaustion and fear. He took in the scene, the shattered glass, the unconscious intruders, Clara clutching Lucy, and Buddy bleeding onto the rug. He dropped to his knees beside the dog. "Buddy," his voice cracked. He wrapped his arms around the animal's neck, feeling the ragged breathing beneath the thick fur. "You're not just a K9, he whispered. "You're family." Buddy looked up at him with tired amber eyes, tail thumping weakly once, before going still in Ethan's lap. When the medics arrived, they took the intruders away in cuffs. Sarah Jennings came soon after, her braid undone, her face pale from the cold. She knelt beside Ethan. "You caught him?" "Travis is in custody," Ethan said softly. This was his backup plan. Sarah nodded. "We'll handle the cleanup." Her voice softened as she looked at Buddy. "He saved them, didn't he?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Like always." Later that night, Lucy tiptoed to Buddy's bed where he rested under a clean blanket, breathing shallow but steady. She placed something beside his paw, a small leather collar, hand-painted with shaky letters that read, Hero. Clara stood in the doorway, watching as Lucy whispered, "He did what my mommy couldn't. He kept me safe." Ethan turned away, his eyes glistening in the flickering lamplight. Outside, the storm began to break. The snow, once violent, softened into gentle flakes, falling silently across Denver as dawn crept over the horizon. Spring had finally returned to Denver, and with it came the sound of life creeping back through the city that had once been buried in snow. The sharp wind of winter had softened into a gentle breeze that carried the scent of wet earth and cherry blossoms from the park. For the first time in months, the Cole household awoke to birdsong instead of sirens, to laughter instead of cries. 2 months had passed since the night everything changed. The warehouse, the arrests, the blood on the snow. And now, as dawn spilled through the curtains, Ethan Cole stood in front of his mirror, adjusting the dark blue dress uniform he had almost forgotten how to wear. The silver badge on his chest gleamed under the morning light, catching the faint reflection of Buddy sleeping at his feet. The German shepherd's shoulder had healed well, though the fur still grew uneven where the stitches had been. He was older, perhaps, but no less vigilant. Every sound outside still made his amber eyes flick open, scanning the world before returning to rest. Downstairs, Clara Bennett was arranging a small bouquet of white lilies into a vase on the kitchen counter. She had grown stronger, more confident since that terrifying night. Her once pale face now glowed with quiet resilience, her soft brown hair loose around her shoulders instead of the tight bun she used to wear when she worked as a nanny. The faint scar on her wrist, a reminder of the ropes that once bound her, was now a small, silvered line, no longer a mark of fear, but of endurance. Clara had taken charge of the paperwork and planning for Ethan's new project, a decision born one evening when she told him, "We can't undo what happened, but maybe we can give it meaning." Her gentle smile that night had stayed with him. Lucy came running into the room, her bright pink dress fluttering, the same color as the torn one she had worn that night, but new, clean, and full of light. Her brown hair was neatly combed into 2 small braids, her cheeks rosy from excitement. "Daddy, are you ready?" she chirped, clutching a handmade card with glitter all over it. Ethan knelt down, straightening her collar. "Almost, sweetheart, but I think someone else needs breakfast first." He nodded toward Buddy, who wagged his tail and stretched lazily. Lucy giggled in amuse and ran to fill his bowl, humming the tune of a lullaby Clara had taught her. Later that morning, the police department's courtyard was filled with rows of blue uniforms and flashing cameras. Reporters waited at the gate while a crowd of officers and civilians stood before the podium. Captain Harold Simmons, a short, solid man with salt and pepper hair and eyes that still carried both pride and guilt, stepped forward to the microphone. His suspension had ended after Travis Benson's confession cleared his name of suspicion. Now, with his dignity restored, he looked at Ethan with quiet respect. "Officer Ethan Cole," Simmons began, his voice, steady but warm, for bravery and unwavering integrity in the face of betrayal and danger, for saving lives not only as a lawman but as a father, the department awards you the Medal of Valor. The applause came like a wave. Ethan stepped forward, the medal catching the sunlight as Simmons pinned it to his uniform. He turned slightly toward the crowd, where Clara stood holding Lucy on her hip, both smiling proudly. Buddy sat between them, wearing a shiny new collar engraved with a single word, Hero. That evening, as the city lights flickered to life, Ethan drove with Clara and Lucy toward the west side of Denver, to a newly renovated red brick building surrounded by open land. The sign out front read, Buddy's Hope Center. 4 retired Canes and their second chance. Ethan parked and stepped out, inhaling the cool dusk air. Inside, the place smelled faintly of cedar wood and soap, fresh paint and possibility. Rows of clean kennels lined one wall, and in the center yard, several retired service dogs played under the supervision of a young trainer named Matt Peterson, a tall, sandy-haired man in his late 20s with a kind face and a quiet energy. Matt had once been a canine handler before an injury during a flood rescue ended his service. His calm demeanor hid a deep well of empathy for the animals in his care. "They're adjusting well," he told Ethan, patting one of the older shepherds on the head. "They've earned their peace." Clara handled the reception area, her natural patience making her perfect for organizing the volunteers. She had a way with people, especially those broken in quieter ways. A few of the volunteers were veterans, some were children who had lost pets, all drawn by the center's message of healing. Lucy, meanwhile, had become Buddy's shadow. She followed him everywhere, helping carry tennis balls or handing out treats, her laughter echoing across the training field. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the mountains, Lucy knelt beside Buddy, holding up a small puppy, one of the rescues brought in from an abandoned lot. "She looks scared," Lucy said softly. The pup trembled in her arms. Clara joined her, smiling gently. "She's been through a lot, just like Buddy once was, but see how he's watching her?" Buddy's amber eyes followed the pup closely, and when she whimpered, he nudged her gently with his nose until she calmed. Ethan stood by the fence, watching them, a rare smile spreading across his face. He had seen too much darkness, too much betrayal, but here, in this place of quiet redemption, the world seemed right again. The next few weeks blurred into a rhythm of small miracles. Clara organized therapy visits for veterans and children, pairing them with gentle, retired dogs from the center. She was tireless, always moving, always finding new ways to help. At night, after the last dog had been fed and the last volunteer had left, she and Ethan would sit on the porch steps, watching the lights of Denver shimmer in the distance. One evening, as a soft rain began to fall, Ethan turned to her. "You could have left, Clara, after everything. But you stayed." She smiled faintly, brushing a lock of damp hair behind her ear. "You needed someone who believed in you, and Lucy needed someone who believed in her. Maybe I needed that too." Their hands brushed, then stayed. Meanwhile, across town, Victoria sat by the hospital window, her blonde hair shorter now, her once hard features softened by time and regret. The therapy sessions had stripped away layers of anger, leaving a fragile calm in their place. A nurse named Ellen, a plump woman in her 50s with gray curls and kind eyes, brought her tea every morning. "You've come a long way," Ellen said one day. Victoria smiled faintly. "I have a long way to go still." She had written a letter, sealed, resting in her lap, addressed to Ethan and Lucy. Inside, she had written the only words that mattered. "I'm sorry. I hope you both find peace." She placed the letter into an envelope, ready to be delivered, and turned toward the window. Outside, the clouds were parting, sunlight spilling across the city. For the first time, she didn't feel the urge to chase or destroy. She simply breathed. A week later, Ethan received the letter at the center. He read it quietly, folded it once, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. He didn't need to say anything. Some wounds healed not with words but with time, and love that refused to fade. On a bright Saturday morning, they all gathered in the park. The sky was clear, the air sweet with spring. Lucy ran ahead, throwing a yellow tennis ball across the field. Buddy bounded after it, muscles rippling beneath his golden black coat, barking joyfully. Clara stood beside Ethan, laughing as the dog returned with the ball and dropped it at Lucy's feet. "You think he'll ever get tired of that?" she asked. Ethan smiled. "Not a chance." Lucy threw the ball again, her laughter ringing out like a song. Buddy chased it once more, his tail cutting through the sunlight like a banner. The past, all its darkness, its pain, seemed distant now, washed away by the simple beauty of this moment. Ethan reached for Clara's hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "You know," he said softly, "justice might wear a badge, but love will always wear the heart." Clara leaned against him, her eyes glimmering. "Then I'd say we've both found our badge of honor." And there, beneath the bright spring sun, the man, the woman, the child, and the dog stood together, not as survivors of tragedy, but as a family born from it. The wind swept gently through the park, carrying the echo of laughter and the promise of peace. In the end, The Light After the Storm is not just a story about justice or survival, it's about grace, forgiveness, and the quiet miracles that God weaves through ordinary lives. Sometimes, His blessings don't arrive with thunder or angels, but in the form of a loyal dog who refuses to give up, a child's laughter that heals a broken heart, or a second chance offered to someone we once thought lost. Ethan, Clara, Lucy, and Buddy remind us that no matter how cold or long the winter may be, faith can bring spring back into our lives. Miracles happen when love meets courage, and when we choose compassion over revenge. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment to tell us what part moved you most, and type Amen if you believe that God still works through kindness, through loyalty, and through the silent angels he sends our way. May God bless you and your loved ones with peace, protection, and new beginnings. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of faith, healing, and the unseen miracles that surround us every day. Amen.